Hi there guys, got a little video here for you today on a Daystate Redwolf. So what we're going to be doing in this one is replacing the magazine indexing pin. So this is the old style system that's no longer needed or used, as the new Daystate magazines are sprung loaded like you would see in a Crown or a Impact. So you see that there. The older ones used a sort of ratchet style system in which this pin here actuated a little arm, and that allowed the magazine to rotate one individual pellet hole at a time. This happened after the shot cycle of the rifle, or during I should say, and it was pneumatically or air operated. This little pin popped up when the shot was fired and allowed the magazine to rotate. However, obviously with the new style magazines, which are sprung loaded, that's no longer needed. So we're going to be replacing it with just a blanking plate. Now these often do break, so in this one we're going to show you exactly how to get them out. This particular block is just one we use for experiments, and it has been fully disassembled. Your rifle does not need to be fully disassembled. All you need to do is take your scope off so you can get to the pin below, and you may also need to remove the stock bolt, although I'll talk about that in a minute. So it's a very simple and quick job, so we'll get right into it. The first thing we're going to do is take a 2mm Allen key and try and undo these two bolts here. Now on my rifle they're loose, as I've had this in and out a few times now, but if your ones are excessively tight and you feel that you're going to round the hex headers out, what you need to do is remove your stock bolt to gain access to this screw in the bottom here. Now my particular rifle obviously doesn't have the trigger guard, so this bolt is just installed to give you an idea of what's going on. So once your stock bolt's out, you'll be able to see this screw in the bottom. You don't need to remove the rifle from the stock, you can get a long 5mm Allen key in there, and what you're going to do is just crack that loose a quarter of a turn. What happens is, if this bolt's done up really tight, it stretches these two bolts here, putting a little bit of pressure on them and making them very tight. So just loosening that bolt in the bottom there should make it so that you can loosen these bolts without problem. It is quite common for these to be rounded out, so just bear that in mind. My one, however, are nice and loose, so I can just go ahead and undo the screws like so. Once the screws are loose, we'll pull this top plate off and put that to one side. Then in the bottom there we see a spring and the indexing pin. Using a pair of tweezers, we'll pull the spring out, and then with the spring out of the way, we'll just remove the indexing pin, stick that to one side, and we're left with a barrel inside the bottom of the block there. Now these can be a little tricky to get out, but I've found the easiest way to remove them is with a set of circlip pliers, these expanding ones. What I do is I put it in there and then simply pull the barrel out. Now sometimes they can be quite tight, as what normally happens is the brass valve core in there rotates slightly, misaligning the hole, and causes this to get wedged, although I've never found one be extremely tight. Normally a little bit of twisting, a little bit of wiggling, and they pop out. If you are having trouble, loosening this bolt in the bottom here does help. But finally, there is an O-ring in the bottom, so if you wanted to remove and replace that, just a 2mm Allen key, poke it in the centre of the O-ring, and then you can lift that out. Now I've replaced a fully intact valve pin, so this is our valve pin, but what normally happens is that they break or shear off. Here's what normally happens. So the top and bottom pins normally shear off. That's fairly common. So if you did have the bottom end of the pin, this long part here, stuck in the bottom, you could use a magnet to try and get that out. What I normally use is just a set of neodymium magnets on the end of a screwdriver, and then pick it out of the bottom there. Right then, once the old pin system's been removed, it's time to reinstall the new part. Now this is just something I've knocked up that replaces the entirety of the indexing pin system. I believe Daystate do sell something very similar, although this is just that one I've made. So to install it, what we're going to do is just drop the O-ring in the bottom there, seat it down nicely with an Allen key, drop the blanking plate over the top like so, and then we can just reinstall the top cover. And again, that's using a 2mm Allen key. And finally, if you did loosen your trigger plate bolt at the bottom here, go ahead and retighten that. And there we have it. The pin will no longer move. It's a fixed unit compatible with the new style of magazines. So there we have it there. We couldn't use the old ones if we wanted to now, as they would not index. If I'm honest, I very rarely use a magazine in a Redwolf. I always single shot load mine. But if we ever do want to use a mag in this rifle, we can do so. The newer rifles may have a slightly different cover plate on the top here. Some of them are coming through without this hole here, and the actual valve in the newer rifles is slightly different. So this is an older style valve, but the newer ones are very similar in appearance, apart from that they don't have this hole in the middle here. The actual outside hole they still do have, but the drilling that connects this bore with this hole is not there. So newer rifles may have a slightly different top plate here. And obviously we can no longer use the old style of ratcheting magazines. Right then guys, that's going to about do it for this one. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.